Welcome back to Vintage Story on the Vinterra server. Thank you for joining me again for episode 2 of our little survival playthrough. This episode, I finally move out of my hobbit hole and build myself an actual shelter just in time as the weather starts making living outside impossible. I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who watched my first video. Despite how it may look, I spent a lot of time on it, and seeing the feedback I received really made me feel inspired to keep going and improving. Hopefully, I can improve my production quality a little bit each video, so I appreciate you all sticking around. Now, without further ado, let's get back into Vintage Story. One thing for me that always becomes an issue at some point is storage space. Because storage solutions are so time consuming to craft, it always feels like you've got a little bit more stuff than you've got the space for. To this end, I decided to craft a few more storage vessels out of clay. I didn't show this last episode, but the crafting process for all clay objects is the same. You start by placing a chunk of clay on the ground, then you build out the shape of the item you want to make layer by layer. I make 2 raw storage vessels and place them in pit kilns to fire for approximately 24 hours. Once this is done, they'll finally be usable. Storage vessels are going to be your main storage option during the Stone Age and early Copper Age. Wooden chests are a huge upgrade, but require nails and strips made on the anvil, as well as planks crafted with a saw. I don't end up making any chests in this episode, but believe me, they are at the top of my list for the future, as firing clay every time I want to make storage gets old very fast. The last time I played, I found a beautiful location for a permanent home on top of some nearby hills. I make my way over there and start setting up a little platform for my things. Take a look at this view though, this game is definitely beautiful. I start laying out a small foundation that I can build the rest of my house on top of. I have no plan going into this build. There are so many different blocks to use with their own unique crafting recipes that I decide to just play it by ear with whatever resources I can find in my immediate area. Because of this, I did have to tear down some parts of my build and retry with new materials at various points, but such is life, I guess. With my foundation in place, I turn my attention to farming. If you've noticed the grass and leaves look a little more orange than they did last episode, it's because winter is quickly approaching. If I want any sort of food prepared for the cold season, I need to start farming like yesterday. I go ahead and lay down a quick and dirty plot of farmland jutting out into the lake. Water sources hydrate farmland beside them, but the hydration percentage drops with every block that is not directly adjacent. That's why I set up the farm so that every single block was next to at least one water source block. Technically, you don't even need a water source for farming. But in that case, you would need to build a watering can out of clay and water your crops daily. I'm not into that sort of upkeep though, so this is the design we've got for now. As with everything in Vintage Story, farming is more complicated than you might expect. You'll notice that every seed you pick up has a primary nutrient, either nitrogen, potassium, or phosphorus, as well as a minimum temperature that it will grow at. Soil begins with having equal amounts of each nutrient, but as you grow crops, they will deplete whatever their primary nutrient is from the soil. These nutrients replenish over time, but will affect the growth speed of your crops if too low. This means that for optimal crop yield, it's a good idea to group crops together by what nutrient they use, and rotate crops after each harvest so that they are always growing in soil that has fully replenished their specific nutrient. Not that this will be an issue for me just yet, as I'll be lucky to get even a single harvest before winter rolls in. I return to my hobbit hole to gather some of my things and test out some build pallets with the blocks that I currently have. Then I start the slow and painful process of carrying my storage vessels over to my new home. This is where playing on the Vinterra server is a huge time saver. Normally, it is not possible to carry storage containers while there are items inside. However, using the carry-on mod, any storage containers can be picked up, and some can even be placed on my back to free up hand space. The only downside to this is the speed penalty while carrying, but I'll gladly take that over the extra trips I'd have to do otherwise to carry my items over. Now that I have some more of my things, it's time to get back to building. I fill in the foundation of my home with dirt and lay a layer of birch planks over top. Now, with a solid floor, I can let go of the items clogging my inventory. I also build myself a little cellar hole to place my perishables in. Cellars in this game are defined as fully enclosed rooms out of direct sunlight, but for optimal food preservation, the walls must be made out of stone, dirt, or bricks. Cellars essentially slow down the spoilage rate of food placed inside of them, and combining this with the spoilage reduction of clay pots makes food last a pretty long time. While I was distracted, some of the local wildlife wandered onto my property. I decided to send a message to any other animals wandering a little too close, and gather some more food in the process. It was a hard-fought battle, but in the end, I was victorious. I logged in the next day to find that winter was upon me. Looking over my crops, I find a disappointing harvest, but at least some of my crops grew to maturity. I'll just have to try again when the weather gets nicer. For the next little while, I settle into a routine of gathering dry grass, wood, clay, and dirt for my build. Along the way, I discovered another surface copper deposit, which I marked on my map to return to later. This build took a lot of trial and error. I ended up replacing the foundation and walls a few times before I got something I liked. My original plan was to use a block called wattle and daub for my walls. This early game block requires a wattle fence to be placed first, and then daub to be placed on top of it. Unfortunately, I didn't realize that daub can only be made with blue clay or fire clay, and I only have red clay. In the end, I scrapped the wattle and daub idea and switched to using mud brick, which can be crafted with red clay. I think this block works perfectly fine as wall material as well. I keep building my walls through the night, taking frequent breaks to light my campfire for warmth or to fend off the local drifters. In the end, I'm finally left with a complete room, which will provide me with the warmth bonus I need to make it through the winter. I build some shelves as well as some more tool racks to clear up the floor, and my new house is finally starting to feel livable. At this point, I use the last of my charcoal to create 2 more ingots. I'm planning on making another axe head and a chisel, which I messed up making in the last episode. And finally, I get started on the roof. I'm using one of the only roofing materials available to me right now, red clay, to make shingles. This process is pretty time consuming, requiring me to build out each shingle, which I then fire in a pit kiln. I believe all in all, this roof took 7 or 8 pit kilns of 48 shingles each, so about 350-ish shingles in total. While I'm waiting for my first batch of shingles to fire, I use my now cool ingots to craft my tools. Finally, I can demonstrate how f***ing cool the chisel is. Using a chisel in my main hand and a hammer in my offhand, I can use the chisel to carve shapes out of pretty much any solid block in the game. I start by carving out a little space to make my doorway look more interesting, but the possibilities with this tool are kinda endless, and you'll be seeing me use the chisel a lot throughout the rest of this series. While I wait, I also get working on panning some bony soil that I found at a ruin along my travels. I mentioned panning as a method of gathering copper in the early game. But panning bony soil specifically can net you some extra rewards such as candles, tools, or in my case, lore books. You see, Vintage Story does have a story, but it's told through various scraps of lore written by different characters throughout its history. It's up to the player to find these books and piece together what happened prior to the player's arrival. I take a break to read my new book, when I get a sudden rude reminder that my house is not lit up enough. This drifter leads me to another very close call, but it also gives me a temporal gear from its remains. This is huge. With this temporal gear, I can set my spawn point, and I will no longer have to fear dying and walking back all the way from spawn. Finally, my first batch of shingles are fired, and I can get started on my roof. I opt for a pretty simple gable roof design, as the winter makes working outside a pain. I usually make small tweaks to my builds as I play though, so I'm fully anticipating this design will improve over time as I gain access to new materials and tools. With the first layer of my roof done, I turn my attention to something that's been bothering me, my foundation. I don't really know what it is, I just think it looks ugly right now, so I begin tearing it down to rebuild. I eventually opt to make the granite cobble a more prominent part of the foundation, and replace most of the horizontal logs with cobble stairs and slabs. I think this design works much better. This new cobble design means I have to craft more granite cobble using stones and clay, which means I'm back to digging for clay. I am really glad I marked a few clay deposits nearby before winter rolled in, as the amount of clay I need for this build is getting pretty high, and there's no shot I'd be able to see it with all this snow. With my next batch of shingles fired, I get back into building my roof, and I actually managed to get most of it done before running out of shingles again. One more pit kiln of shingles should do it though. In the meantime, I finish up the upstairs walls with some slabs. That's right, you can place slabs vertically in this game. Minecraft could never. I use my chisel to clean up some of the rough corners on the interior and voila, house almost complete. It's a simple design, but one that gives me a lot of room to play around with and expand. And most importantly, it gives me somewhere to shelter myself from the cold. With my house complete and my confidence up, I decide to hunt some of the local moose for food. Most animals in a Vintage Story will fight back when attacked, but depending on their temperament and health, they may also run away. This makes it very important to stay alert when hunting, as one hit from a moose will be enough to take me down instantly. I managed to kill 2 bighorn rams and 2 moose. This should give me plenty of food for the time being. It also provides me with animal fat, which is honestly one of the most important crafting materials in the game. Animal fat is used in a ton of late game mechanical components, but for my purposes, it also serves as my first permanent light source. You see, torches when placed on a wall will burn out after 48 hours. But combining animal fat with a bowl in my inventory gives me an oil lamp, which emits slightly less light but never goes out. I craft 4 oil lamps to place around my house, finally giving me a little bit of permanent light. I use my last batch of shingles to finish up the detailing on my roof. Then I get to making myself a little fireplace inside my house. There's no mechanical reason to have a fireplace, but I think a dedicated spot for cooking and smelting makes my house feel organized and lived in. I of course use the chisel to work out a good design, and I connect my downstairs fireplace to a chimney which sticks out the roof. This is why I love the chisel. It allows so much customization to your builds that I was not used to before I started playing. You can sink hours into this game and spend it all chiseling different designs, especially when you take into account the ability to add multiple blocks to a single block for multi-material designs. As a final touch to my house, I add some stairs and fences on the outside to give the impression of support structures. And with that, my base is fully complete. I can sit back in fulfillment as I watch the sunrise over my new home. I can't wait to see what this looks like in the spring. Thank you all for watching episode 2 of Vintage Story Survival on the Vinterra server. We're making some strides towards prospering in this unforgiving world, and I think I'm about ready to get back into searching for more copper, and hopefully even tin to make bronze. Again, a huge thank you to the Vinterra server for hosting a wonderful game with tons of quality of life mods. If you'd like to see how you can join, the link for information will as always be in the description down below. Feel free to leave a comment down below, as it means the world to me to see people engaging with my content, and it really keeps me inspired to keep going. I'll see you guys next time, but until then, take care.